You ready? All right. There we go. You're ready right there up front. Welcome, everybody. This is our hour to spend here together. Is a fascinating topic. It's analytics and culture in baseball. I think it can go in a lot of different directions. I'd like to welcome in our panel. We have an outstanding panel. He's in his 11th year, Director of Research and Development for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Please welcome Max Glick. See, I'm a big guy on, don't hold your applause. Go ahead and applaud. He is in the baseball ops department, assistant to the general manager. He was a major league relief pitcher for 8 years. In 2014 for the Red Sox, he had 70 innings with a sparkling 1.74 ERA plus. Burke Badenhop. That's a 2.29 ERA for you oldsters. And he is a former general manager for the St. Louis Cardinals, with the clubs in that position for 8 years, now a vice president with the Cardinals. Please welcome Michael Girsch. You know, I think even that this would be a question if this was being asked years ago. It would probably be asked in another forum, but it would also be something along the lines of the old, territorial battles. Because you go, well, at least Michael is old enough to remember as I am. I'm not saying you're all. I'm there with you and beyond you. But that it was, this needs to be balanced. This analytics stuff needs to be balanced. It's like, well, obviously, because we came in with a foundation that it was a physical game, grit and guts out on the field. And now, how about quantifying or having some sort of methodology that makes sense? But Michael, why don't we start with you? I almost feel like, well, if there is so much energy toward data and the sophisticated level of things that we see today, what is the right balance? Is it possible to go, I guess, as they used to say, too far, where so much of your time and energy is absorbed by data, by measuring, by things that are not just on the field and a team being cohesive?
Yeah, so I've been with the Cardinals since 2006, and at the time then it was a battle. It was anything that went to the analyst came from the scouts, or there was a pie that we were all like fighting over, kind of. I think now we're at a spot where most of the new stuff that keeps being developed, whether it's ball tracking, player tracking, biomechanics, it's all on the analytics side. So it's the new stuff's always coming with data. Like there is no, we had 100 and whatever years of baseball where we didn't have data, and now everything keeps coming with more data. I think the challenge for teams is building a culture of trust where analytics people can make mistakes in front of coaches and not be kicked out of the room, and coaches can ask silly questions to analysts and not be mocked for their silly questions, and that we're all pulling in the same direction and trying to figure out how to use the data we have to make the best decisions we can.
Burke, speak to that as a guy who's made the transition from the field. You're a player and you're in the front office now. Where are we as far as that balance?
So I think I came in at a kind of a nice blend of a time, like being drafted in 2005, playing for a while, and then being able to transition into this role. Very much still played in the old guard, like I played at Damashki Field when I was in short season where Babe Ruth played, like down in New York, as old as it gets type of thing. But for me, I think we can dive as deep as we want into analytics stuff. It's what we get to the player. It's what we get to the coach or whatever. It's knowing who our audience is and who can handle it, who necessarily can't handle it, because we want to get a result out of a player. We want to get a result out of a coach. So by going too far, it doesn't really matter how far we go in the front office, as long as we know what is the right amount to give to that player. Right. I think that's where we're kind of transitioning now. And now we get a little bit more of a feedback loop coming up from the player. And now we have a better idea of what they can handle and everything as we've gone through this a little bit further.
Right. Your ilk is, of course, welcomed. You have was it economics or finance major? You're a college major. So you're right. You have this financial background. You have a data background.
And it's easier to speak those languages when you're dealing with analysts, scouts, players, and the like.
Right. Max, where's research and development? You're where the rubber meets the road. What is the balance as far as the population within baseball ops within the whole sphere of the organization?
I'd say it's a pretty good mix. Like we're hiring a lot of former players, but also we want people with technical skills to be able to build the models and put everything together. But like Burke was saying, it's always the ability to communicate it is probably more important than the actual ability to put it together. It needs to be in the language of the players, the coaches, the scouts, as well as being digestible, whether that's visuals where everyone understands the picture or being able to translate it to Spanish, Japanese, Korean, whatever language the players speak.
How large is your, well, what you can tell me, how large is your analytics baseball ops department?
About 11 people.
11. And Michael, the Cardinals?
It's hard to count these things, but I would say like 15 to 20-ish, depending on who you count and what category.
Okay. How have you seen the mix change from where it used to be? I remember Mike Rizzo of the Nationals said the baseball ops department used to be the kid with the sheet, the kid with the come down to the field with the sheet, and that was it. And that's built from there. How has that population changed?
In 2006, when I was hired, there was no baseball development department. I was hired into amateur scouting because that was the only job that was available, and I did stats on the side. In 2008, we created an analytics department. I was the director of it, and there were 2 of us in it. So I directed one other guy. It was a big ego boost. The biggest change, I got my job because I was good at Excel. I am still very good at Excel. No one cares that I'm good at Excel anymore. I don't know where our data is. I don't know how to access it. I don't know how to write SQL code or R code or access our Google Cloud. I have to ask someone, like, can you just send me a spreadsheet with these 7 columns and this list of players? And then they send it to me. So just the amount of data we have, we used to run drafts off of a guy's laptop. And if that laptop had been stolen, we would have not run our draft very well in 2006 and 2007. And now it's all much more modernized. We run an actual analytics department with, data engineers and data analysts and web development people. It's like a real thing.
It's as you're even talking about it, is it sometimes possible to lose sight? Again, this is it's like an old cliche, but as you have so much data on a certain player, at what point do you try to hey, what kind of kid is this? You know what I'm saying? Because I love to see the statistical profile of a player, but then what is that? Is that player, as we've talked about, what's motivating those numbers? Is this someone who can keep increasing, getting better? Is this someone who will go through a wall for you? How do you try to balance that as an actual kid that I need to be talking to, and this is his data set?
Yeah, I mean, we have all that data, but that's not everyone in the organization has access to or uses all the data all the time, right? Our AA pitching coach needs to know the player as a person, as a human being, what makes him tick, how to give him advice, when to give him advice, when to, whether he's been tried to redo his slider 4 years in a row and it's time to stop banging the door on the slider and try something different. But that coach needs to know that, needs to understand the player that way. The guy in the office whose job is to scrape the data from every college game that happened on last night and make sure it's all in our database doesn't need to know any of those college kids and what they're, right? Everyone's got a role and those roles are different. I don't think the importance of personal connection and knowing players as human beings has been diminished at all. It's just the group who needs that is separate from the group who's, sitting in the office working through code.
Okay. Burke, speak to that if you can.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty, nuanced take. I think of our draft class that we had last year. I only deal with pitchers, sorry, hitters, you have to fend for yourselves. But in the pitchers that we brought in meeting these kids, you can tell who has a chance to be a big leaguer, and you can tell kids that maybe need to mature, maybe need to develop a lot of other interpersonal skills or some makeup stuff. So finding the kids that are big leaguers, right? And then understanding who needs more data, who needs less data. We got some, I was a person that was very much a paralysis by analysis type guy. You give at Bowling Green State University, if you would have given me expected OPS and all this stuff and whatever, I might have never gotten anybody out type of thing, because I would have dug too far. So we got to know who can handle it, who can't handle it, that type of stuff. Along with, I like to think that, all these numbers, it's for practice, right? When we get in the game, we've got to do. We've got to get outs. we're in the entertainment business, right? Like we want to get outs, we want to throw strikes, we want to get hitters out. And thinking about like, oh, where's that dot on my slide? Or if I had my iPad, you know, and my Rapsodo behind me right now, where would that be? The hitter in the box doesn't care about that. You know what I mean? There's more of the, you know, me versus you, mano a mano type of stuff that now as players come out of college and you talk about R&D departments, there's just gaggles of SEC, you know, kids running around every Friday when I go see games. So that's very new to our game as well. So understanding that, like getting the player on the field, getting him to compete, having him prepared to make the best swing decision, the best pitch decision, or the best, you know, adjustment from the previous pitch decision. That's all data, but at the end of the day, it's getting it done on the field at that time.
And Max, you can speak to that too. And I think what interests me is looking at how the player will develop, especially in this day and age where you can make such improvements if you have that adaptability, or you might want to call it athletic intelligence. Like, how much do you look at that and try to figure out not just what has happened, but what will happen?
Definitely, yeah. So there are certain tests that players can take that can give you some sort of an objective measure of their ability to improve or their makeup, but most of the time, you have different scouts.
Yeah.
He has a water. It's okay. I don't have a water. Go ahead.
Different scouts and different individuals will evaluate makeup differently. So you won't be able to compare them on the same scale, if that makes sense.
Okay. How good are those? You're choking still. How good? I'll buy some time with a longer question. I need Al Leiter out here. How good? Oh, good. You got that. Don't tell him I said that. I love Al. How good? Tell me about those tests. How good? I wanted to ask that actually. I didn't get the football. Can you measure adaptability and ability to learn?
There are people who think you can, but it's also a test-taking environment, which is very different from a game-playing environment. A lot of our athletes don't go to college, or they might not be the best students. They might not be interested in taking a test. So if they aren't interested in the test, then it's kind of useless. If they don't want to give it their whole attention, then what do the results even mean?
Okay. What are your thoughts? Both of you guys jump in on that.
Are you? Yeah, I think kind of seeing how they act on the field, getting to know coaches, getting to know other people. We try to thread into some of our questionnaires and make up stuff like non-baseball type of things, you know, like tell me a time where you were challenged and how you solved the problem, right? Because eventually at the end of the day, in any job we're doing, we're problem solvers, you know, on the baseball field, we're problem solvers. And so learning how to attack problems, and you're tasked with solving hundreds of problems at any given, you know, start for a major league pitcher at the same point, you know, in real time type of stuff. So
You guys have the same. I'm wondering now, Michael, do you guys have this? Is there a test that's used universally, or do you have your own proprietary tests? Meaning like some sort of adaptability test or something.
There was one years ago. The Scouting Bureau did one. You may have taken it.
yeah, I probably took it with someone just like throws you a pamphlet and like you're in. Congratulations! Like you took the bureau test type of thing.
Yeah, and I've spoken to. I'll just tell you it was Lance Lynn because it's a good story about Lance. Lance told me that he lived with 3 baseball players and 1 smart kid, and all the baseball players gave the smart kid their pamphlets to fill out. So that's how reliable that was. I think in a perfect world, I don't know. No one wants to assume that their whole like motivation and being can be summarized in a Scantron test, right? Like that's sort of a depressing idea. And I think we're the type of people who like don't mind taking tests. If you imagine the people in your life who hate tests the most and think that you can summarize them by having them click an iPad for 15 minutes, I think it's pretty unlikely. But there are a lot of people who will sell us tests and tell us how good it is, but whether it actually works or not, you're much better off like talking to players, having your scouts get to know them, talking to their teammates, there's 1,000 ways that you can get, I think, better data than you can from a test, but there are teams who seem to rely on it more than others.
See, I would even look at Burke. I want you on this because like pitcher, it's already so different for pitchers. Like, look, I remember when the Brewers had a pitching lab and that was new and different. And now I think everybody's got a pitching lab. It's so sophisticated. Guys are working on it on their own. Basically every pitcher is his own engineer and scientist. So Is that more important to measure like what your ability to learn and attack your issues and know your pitch shape and your XY axis and all that?
Kind of, as I said before, I think it's more, there's not many people that don't come with that skill set now. I think the more important thing is to when to turn it off and when to just play the game, you know, when to know that I've prepared and I've practiced enough and now we're going to go out and we're going to make those pitches. Yeah, you definitely can't overdo some of that stuff. I think the apples to apples comparison of you're getting data on a Rapsoda versus a TrackMan versus Hawkeye data versus this guy's throwing in a garage, this guy's throwing at tread, here's the humidity here and there and all that stuff. And so the differences that you're getting in pitch data or ball flight data can be very different. So in terms of like how that one-to-one translates into Salt River Fields in Arizona today, like it's probably not as applicable as you really want to say, but you know, it's all relative. So I think it's important to know those things, but it's also important to kind of know what you don't know, if that makes any sense, and know when to turn it off.
Yeah, I think what I'm driving at is like, can we measure and what is our take, the modern take on makeup? Michael, you first, like well, that used to be the main thing. Like, what's the kid's makeup meaning? And maybe we like the language for it now, but it does mean a certain resiliency, attention to detail, knowing your place within the hierarchy, all these little things within the group dynamic. What's the modern take on that?
No, I think, yeah, I think it's no less important than ever before to have kids who have perseverance. A lot of the people we draft, I'm just thinking of the draft in general as an example, but they've never failed at any sport in their entire life. They've been the best baseball player on every field they've ever been on. They probably were also like all-state in 2 other sports until they decided to drop them to focus on baseball. Like they just don't know how to fail. And trying to understand whether kids who fail for the first time are going to like, you know, roll up into the fetal position and call mom, or they're going to, you know, roll up their sleeves and figure out how to battle through this is a challenge that, you know, again, I don't think you can do a test that can tell you the answer to that. I don't think talking to the kid can necessarily, I don't think the kid necessarily knows how he's going to react because he's never had that challenge before. But it's an ongoing part of what we do, which is have our scouts try to evaluate how a kid's going to handle challenges, how he's going to react to coaching, how he's going to, you know, be away from home for the first time, live on the road. You know, we used to send kids to Johnson City, Tennessee. The first thing they you know, got drafted. That's not the kids who came from the SEC, you know, flying private planes to their road trips, and now they're busting around the Appy League. That's not exactly glamorous, right? Like there's a whole bunch of questions about just growing up in the game that are a big part of success. It's just really hard to know who has it and who doesn't until you're actually with them for months on end.
Right. So you hit it, whatever it is. Talk about it, makeup, Burke.
Yeah, it's kind of like who's going to get it done. You know, they like to say that professional athletes are the best physical compensators, but I'd also say like makeup wise are compensators too. Like they're going to figure out a way to get from point A to point B. And the number of times and the different number of ways you can do that to have a long career in any professional sport, the ones that do it the best, just do it a variety.
Can you identify that? Is that something that's just too vague and nebulous, or is that something that we can try to find that this kid has a certain tenacity? When he gets hurt, he comes back quickly. He's always paying attention to every pitch, even if he's not playing, things like that.
Yeah, I think like when you look in some like, I mean, the Indians are kind of notorious for this, like finding, you know, good students, you know, kids that are tested in the classroom, right? My college coach always said, I knew that if we take good students, kids that are going to work hard in the classroom, I know they're going to work hard on the field type of thing. So just ways that they've been tested throughout life. A little bit of a counter, I was all-state in nothing. In high school, I was not even first team all league as a pitcher. I was a utility and I hit 290 in Northwest Ohio. So I don't know how that happened, but those types of things I was not the best pitcher in the state. I was not the best pitcher I was not even the best pro prospect on my team. And so that type of stuff of always wanting to prove myself, I think is kind of what the makeup that I intuitively had.
So did any scouts or coaches see that in you, that you had it, even though it was not there with the glossy resume at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't,
Yeah,
I
no,
don't know for that.
Yeah.
By the time I got to pro ball, probably, yes.
You what?
By the time I got to pro ball. you
Okay.
know, And I put together my first real big season in low A ball.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of separated myself and you kind of see, you don't throw 185 innings in low A and just by accident, type of thing. Yeah.
Max, weigh in on makeup and trying to identify the good parts.
Yeah, I think one thing I've heard countless times since working in baseball is that tools get you drafted and makeup gets you to the big leagues. Like every player who gets drafted is good at something. Otherwise, you're not getting a chance in an org. We're also looking for good makeup throughout the whole org. So if you're asking us about culture in general, like we want a growth mindset from everybody, whether that's a player, a coach, everybody. We're looking for people who want to work hard to get better. And then that helps feed into everything that we do and the culture for the players and everybody working to get better.
That's interesting. All very interesting answers. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I just want to add one thing. Like, I think like the makeup of players can change over time. We've had kids that we've drafted out of high school who were not the hardest working, did not have the best attitude, were not open to coaching, thought they had all the answers. And at some point, either the game slaps them upside the head and says, this isn't going to work unless you change your attitude, or sometimes life does. We've had players who get married or have a kid and have a newfound like outlook that this isn't about me anymore. This is about my family and my career. Like, it's not a static thing. But I don't think if it's not good, it's not normal that it changes or flips 180 degrees, but it's not like it's a set thing that
Right.
the moment you show up, we decide, oh, you're in the bad pile and we just give up on you. Like that doesn't make any sense for the player or for the organization or for anyone else.
Right.
I had one last thing, like a lot of times too, we see in the draft, a lot of amateurs, their goal is just to get drafted, right? So you can see the guys that's the finish line, and you can see the guys that want to get to the big leagues, and that's the finish line. And then you can see the guys that want to get better regardless of what they're doing every day, and they want to succeed in the big leagues forever. And there's a variety of different people. And like there's different financial incentives as those points hit along your career and everything. But I think makeup wise, more often than not, we'll see you see somebody that gets out of the draft and then we shut it down type of thing.
Right.
So the makeup of what's the main motivator, I think is kind of what really we're all kind of striving to find.
The next topic I want to hit is, I'll tell a quick story. I was working with Mark DeRosa, who works with us at MLB Network. His son is 14 or 15, and Mark coaches one of these elite travel teams in Atlanta, high-level kids. They travel the country and play, and his son is a good player. And he said he was having a conversation with his son saying, hey, you're making good swing decisions. Your exit velocity is right on target. Your routes are where they want to be. At some point, you should get some hits. Like at some point, get a drive in a run, right? So the question is, and you can see it now where it seems to me from my vantage point that, amateur baseball, now youth baseball it's so toolsy because we can measure everything. So Max, maybe start there. Is the tail wagging the dog where we're not talking about ability to play baseball, but we're talking about the exit velo off the bat, exit velo off the hand?
Yeah, I think those underlying metrics all matter, but you also need to be able to perform on the field. Like the early SABR metrics, when you're looking at kind of projecting performance, it was always performing and being young for your level or whatever, was your greatest predictor of future success. Now we have more granular metrics that can give us the ability to evaluate players probably a little better or add more color to that, but you need to be able to perform on the field or it doesn't matter. Like if you can't perform in college or A-ball, how are you going to perform in the big leagues? Even if you're hitting the ball hard, you're not swinging and missing, maybe you're prioritizing the wrong things, and you also need to learn to play the game. We're here to win games. We're not here to maximize exit velo.
Right, but getting drafted or getting promoted or getting a scholarship, it's more about that stuff, right? Your individual tools, right? That's projectable.
Definitely, but there'll be some guys who are smaller players who might not swing and miss or something like that, where they're going to perform in high school and they're still going to get a chance. And some of those guys will keep performing and have that chance. But yeah, like you're saying, it's with all the data tracking it, being able to put up big numbers that we can track is going to get you seen, and it's going to get you on a radar for sure.
Okay. Burke?
Yeah, I think from like a pitching perspective, obviously like velocity is king now and everything like that. But the ability to pitch, the ability to mix and match, the ability to understand those types of things, there's not as many metrics for that. You know what I mean? I like to call that, like doing the dance, we got to know what dance steps go after each other. And that's where I think amateur scouting and pro scouting and stuff and being there and still putting that data, writing a 50 grade for a fastball grade is still data, and I think we still value that type of stuff a lot. But yeah, there's still those overperformers, right? Or the underperformers. And I think as the iterations of data and analytics, we continue to try to churn those things through and understand why. And to your prior questions and topics, like a lot of times might come back to makeup, and things like that, or just, crazy. How do you, judge Tony Gwynn's hand-eye coordination type of stuff? You know what I mean? Like that's probably pretty tough. And there's some things we'll probably just never figure out.
Right. Oh, true. Michael, I think like Max said, like if you're successful, you'll get a chance. Is that true? Like if you're 5'10", 170, you're the best player on the field every time you play for your high school, let's say it's a good high school team and everything else, but you're just not particularly toolsy, you're not crushing the ball, you're small, you're not, does that kid have a chance?
Okay, so out of high school, like that kid probably goes to college, like realistically, right? I think the way, I can't speak for all teams, but I think the way most teams use, exit velocity and spin rate and velocity and all those things, like they're a proxy for performance, right? We're trying to predict future performance. Like our job is just to predict the future. Like we've had lots of discussions about like how to redefine the save and all these things. Like I don't care unless it tells me who's gonna be good next year. Like I don't care who wins the MVP. I don't care who goes in the Hall of Fame. Like it has nothing to do with my job. My job is to figure out what's gonna happen next year. If we don't have performance data because you're a short kid from Portland, Oregon, who has a great high school player, but like, what does that mean? We probably let you go to Oregon State. And then when you're Nick Madrigal and you hit 400 for 3 straight years in the Pac-10, you go like 5th overall, right? Because then we have data that says you can perform.
Stephen Kwan, right?
Yeah. Right. But will a lot of teams like, the percentages are the guys who are big and strong and fast and hit the ball really hard and throw really fast and run the 40 really fast. Like, if you don't know anything else, like take those guys. Like you're just gonna be right more often taking those guys.
Right.
But in 99% of the cases, we know more than that. We have your history of your performance, whether it's been in high school summer leagues or it's been in college or it's been in the minor leagues or it's been wherever. And so then the question that we're all battling with all the time is how do you predict future performance? How much weight do you put on what they've done in the past, and how much weight do you put on how they do what they've done in the past, and how much weight do you put on the changes we might be able to make to this kid that would help him in the future, that would turn good into great or but there is a point, like it doesn't matter how good your stuff plus score is. It matters whether the hitters hit the ball. Like that's all that matters. No one cares in the big leagues whether you have, great metrics. You got to get the job done.
I'm wondering though, how often do you find, even if you're just thinking it to yourself, especially with the changes, the vast change, the infiltration with the Cardinals getting sophisticated and on board with the whole revolution, do you ever find is the tail wagging the dog, or is there a tendency to go find that and not say, hey, what is that? What player am I actually looking at here? And bring yourself back to, I got to think a little more like a scout or something like that.
Yeah. I think in my career, I think there's a little bit of a path where there's a lot of emphasis put on scouting, on the tools, on the 5 tools in again, draft decision-making. That emphasis went away as we put more and more emphasis on performance, especially college performance, because we got better and better at translating college performance into the minor leagues, and we could compare their summer leagues when they use wood bats, and we could all do all this stuff. And now we're kind of going back to tools again but now it's instead of, Joe Scout's opinion on your tools, it's like the computer's analysis of your tools. And I do at sometimes worry that if we go too far down that path, we get away from getting guys who are good at baseball. We get guys who are good at whatever, stuff plus or spin or whatever that is correlated with being good at baseball, but it's not the same thing as being good at baseball. On the other hand, when you're doing something in the draft and you're, 5 steps up the ladder away from the big leagues, you need to be able to make all those steps and keep getting better. And if you have these other tools, it might be suggested that you'll be able to take your performance with you in a way that someone without the tools might not be able to take the performance with you, right? So it's all trying to put, trying to piece it all together and predict what a kid's path's going to look like.
You had a key phrase there, Max, weigh in on this. How do you figure out who's good at baseball? I think that crystallizes the thought. That's it. How do you find out who's good? And we know all that encompasses. Can we find who's good at baseball?
I think that's your performance stats. Like, it's very hard to perform in baseball and hurt your team. Like, if you get on base, you're generally not hurting your team. If you get the batter out as a pitcher, you're not hurting your team. In other sports, you can hog the ball in basketball, or you can do something selfish where it hurts your team. Generally in baseball, if you make a positive result, you're not hurting your team. So being good at baseball is generally being able to make a positive result. You could take too many risks. You could be overly aggressive. You could be overly passive where you don't have the ability to do that. But generally being able to perform well means you're good at baseball.
But in the thin slice, you see guys who hit for the situation, who are in the correct spot for the relay, that don't overthrow the relay guy. This happens at the major league level. When we get on MLB Now, we do a whole segment called Baseball He Plays. It's on baseball awareness. We do a lot of measuring of individual defensive statistics. What we don't measure, maybe you guys are measuring it, but what is publicly available, we don't measure team cohesive defense, coordinated defense. So that's what I'm saying. Like those little things that we saw, like Yankees Dodgers World Series. One team did it, the other team just doesn't do it, and it's small things. And now we're botching things. Well, they botched a few things, but generally, it's just small things that lead to a base and an extra base here, and you're leaking bases. That's what I mean. Good at baseball. The extra fine things that make a big difference.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's very hard to track that, like the fundamentals, really, which is what we're working on at every level in the minor leagues. You might be tracking the other stuff, but keeping a gameplay leaderboard or whatever, where you're tracking, are we taking the other bases? Are we preventing guys from taking bases? And being able to keep track of who is optimizing that and who isn't. And then being able to focus on that through our practice, pre-games, after games, because it doesn't show up in the box score other than, oh, a run scored.
Burke, I get, like Al Leiter will always tell me, like when he's watching his son Jack was, number 2 pick, he's watching all this New Jersey baseball, high school baseball. And he would often say, he's like, that kid can't play, but he'll be drafted. That kid can't play. That kid can play. He won't be drafted. Do you know what I mean? There's a skill set of being good at baseball. Are we rewarding that properly?
Yes and no. I think, you can open up any Instagram and see, all kinds of kids throwing 97 miles an hour, and you just think, like, how are these guys all not in AA or the big leagues, right? And you can go out any Friday night, you can go to the, Pac-12, the SEC, the ACC, and guys throw noise. I'm like flabbergasted how much velocity there is on any given weekend in college baseball. But yeah, can you put it together, right? Are you going to just throw the 2-0 fastball down the middle? Can we make the right choice? I was thinking, when you're talking about, can we play baseball? A guy that's been around for a long time that's in camp with us, Eldemaro Vargas. Like the other day, he grounded out to second base with 1 out and runner at third. We scored a run and we got up 1-0 in the first inning.
You guys have a lot of good guys who are good at baseball. Right? It shows. It's what you're kind of known for.
I think like our manager, Torey Lavola, is like, he's very much on that, and things that you don't, one of the things I love the most being a ground ball pitcher is like a double play, right? To see how precise major league infielders are at turning double plays. Now there's a little bit, nobody's trying to kill the second baseman anymore, which kind of opens up the double play a little bit. But the amount of time that they have to field the ball perfectly, hit the guy at second base on the chest perfectly, turn that into a good throw to first base. Like Josh Naylor the other day made an unbelievable pick that, like, I don't think people understand how hard it is, other than he picked the ball and he ran into the dugout type of thing. And so to your point of like being good at baseball, like, yeah, we still need to be very much aware of those types of things.
I just want to, another 5 minutes, we'll take questions. I want to get, if you probably have a lot of good questions, we're going to get to them. Just one thing that hit me. I did speak to Stephen Kwan this week, for example, and I asked him, and I was amazed by his answer. And when I would get guys, like we had some minor league guys that were talking to that I really didn't know, and I would just say, so you're a big star in high school? Nope. I was amazed at how many said no, that I figured you must have been all state in this and do that. Nope. And it kind of speaks to like there is a longer path than just measuring the tools of a 15-year-old, right?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's unique about our game is that no matter how good you are in high school, like except for like a very, very few exceptions, you do go to the Appy League and ride a bus around for a year, and then you go to the Midwest League and ride the bus around for a year, and then you go to, I mean, like it is a long, slow path. It is not the NBA where you go from, you know, summer hoop star for your high school to the NBA in 18 months or whatever. I think there's it's not really, athleticism is a big part of our game, but you can't just like out athlete baseball. You actually have to learn the skills of defense and hitting and pitching. And in high school, I think you might be able to out athlete the game. And I think there are a lot of players like Burke who didn't out athlete it, but worked their ass off to learn the skills it takes to succeed as they moved up and got to a level that eventually becomes a big leaguer, right? So there's like, you know, the guys that go at the top of the draft are the kids who, you know, were always the best in every team they've ever been. But there are tons of players. We draft kids out of D3 schools. We have undrafted free agents. There's guys we sign out of the independent league. It's like, it's just a different sport because there's so much skill and so much, like a pitcher can change a grip and suddenly become a whole different guy than he was, you know, the year before. And it just allows us to chase the dream for a long time.
Excellent. Well, we have so many young people here, and I know these are the questions they always want to ask, and then we'll open it up to your questions. Max, what makes someone stand out? A new employee, someone new to a club? What would make, you know, one of these, you know, sorry, I'm calling you kids, have kids your age and older, in college, what makes someone stand out in your eyes and in an organization's eyes?
Well, as I was saying earlier, like the desire to get better is the number one thing because nobody comes in fully developed. They're coming in out of college or whatever.
I'm talking about them.
Yeah.
Front office. Okay, good.
Just like the players. It's as we were saying, the culture within the organization.
All right.
You want everybody at every position to be able to work hard to get better and to drive each other. So maybe these students might have some of the coding knowledge, but not a ton of it. And we need to work more on modeling, or maybe some of them are really good at the computer side, but they don't fully understand the game of baseball, or they don't fully understand kind of communicating these sort of things to players, coaches, non-technical audiences. So it's kind of understanding the skill set of each individual and then being able to guide them in their development to continue to get better, especially if we're hiring younger people like our audiences here.
Okay. Burke, what do you think?
From like a player's perspective, like what excites?
Just what do you think? Like when you see someone that stands out to you now among your colleagues, like what should they be aware of that makes someone a valuable member of your team?
I think like attention to detail, like seeing things that everyone, whoever we work with in baseball or whatever, everyone's own lens is unique. And getting into the front office side for me, I always thought like, yeah, man, everybody probably thinks that. Like, why should I even mention that in this meeting? But really, your take is an interesting take, you know, and so bringing what you love about baseball, our country is so huge and there's so, you know, wherever you fell in love with baseball, whether it's in the Appy League or whether you love big league baseball or college baseball or little league baseball, you know, those types of things. And I mean, our game's been around for a very long time and it's evolved and everything like that. So I think you can see somebody that loves baseball. I think somebody that just really is passionate about the game of baseball. That really excites me.
That's good. That's good advice, right? Right. It's good. Let that soak in. And Michael, you as a general manager for a long time, you tell like what would make someone stand out in your organization?
I think especially when you're new in the industry, asking good questions is more important than having good answers. I think when you first, especially if you're an analyst, you're going to build some model someday and you're going to not understand why everyone doesn't do whatever the model says, because like you built a model and it's right. And why are we not just doing this? You're much better off asking like, what am I missing? You know, what have I not thought of? How can I make this better? Just some sort of being like self-deprecating, being aware of like kind of where you are in your knowledge and being willing just to ask people. And honestly, I think one of the best things you can do is, whether you're a analytical person or a on-field personnel or whatever, is when you start out, show that you can talk to the other side and like create relationships across those divides. Because that's what our game's all about, is getting all the information together to make the best decisions we can. And so I suspect most of this room will be on the analytical side, like being able to talk to a coach, being able to talk to a scout and like have a conversation, ask them questions, respect their knowledge, even if it's different than yours. I think that's really important.
You know, I was, and the people in this room, by the way, like when you're up giving a presentation, as I imagine you as a general manager, when you had to address a room quite often, you can tell who's paying attention. You can tell who's on their phone and who's not. I can't tell you how impressed I've been the last 2 years talking to you guys up in that classroom with Tyrone. And I'm giving advice. And I'm like, well, the advice I'm giving, you guys have had. So like your ability to pay attention, to be focused, to show respect to people who are speaking, your boss, something our ex-ball players, and we have a lot of good, like what we call glue guys, that Major League Baseball network. And they always stress, be a good teammate. That's something even I think of all the times, like, hey, think of other people. How do you make other people look better? Be a good teammate. Along those lines, we have a lot of time for questions now, so we're going to have questions. Here's a tip. You get one question. No double-barreled questions. Journalistic tip, one question, and keep it succinct. You're not on WFAN. Hold on. I got 6 questions. Here you go. There you go. You can start.
Okay, so right now, I guess in kind of a scouting report lens, you can put a number to some things like hitting or power or speed, that kind of thing. Do you think that may ever happen with personality? Like maybe if they're nicer or they're more approachable, maybe they'll be higher. If they're, I don't want to say meaner, but they're more closed off, maybe in a way they may have a lower score. That kind of thing. Do you think that's ever going to happen, or is that not really how this works?
I'd say, yeah, I think teams are already doing that. We have a whole mental performance department who will evaluate players on a few different areas and kind of break it down in different attributes, different things that we think are important. And scouting reports will put some sort of structured data value on makeup, whether that's text or numeric. They'll put those on every player.
That's a good question. So there's a number on someone's makeup?
From either the scouts or from our mental skills side, like they'll put a number on them, which will then end up going into everything else that we do.
Interesting. Okay.
Just one thing on that, like makeup, like I have 3 daughters who like are roughly the age of the people we're drafting now. It's not about like finding them a husband, right? It's about finding someone who's going to make it to the big leagues, right? Like some big leaguers are not well centered. They're not the nicest people in the world, but they will stab their own mother to get to the big leagues. Like that's okay. Like we can work with that.
Well, it's a meritocracy is another way of putting it. Yes, in there. Yes, go pass it around. There we go.
Thank you for coming to speak to us. So I'm a recent graduate thinking about getting into scouting and player evaluation myself. And you all talked about how communication across your organization is very helpful. And sometimes you need to know who to talk to and who not to talk to when it comes to analytics. They might not be open to it. So my question is, how do you make somebody who's really against it, more open to it? How do you bridge that conversation? Do you have any successes of doing that with people in your organization?
I'll start there. So not everything has to be some model output, right? Like data can be very basic, right? Like data can be Randy Johnson's not really into the analytics, right? Left-handed, throws hard. There you go. There's your 2 data points, right? Like that we'll start there. I think too, when I think about sitting down with our draftees last year, we don't want to start throwing crazy numbers at them and blow them away. And then all of a sudden they're not in, right? I simply started with, what's the average walk rate in the major leagues? And they were like, oh, we knew this. We had somebody, there was one of the nerdier guys yesterday that told us this, right? Or whatever. And I was like, yeah, like if you don't know what the average walk rate is, you don't know if you're doing good or doing bad. What's 25th percentile? What's 75th percentile? And like all of a sudden these guys start kind of lighting up, they're like, oh, okay, what's the average K rate, stuff like that. What's average velocity? So it helps players know that like, yeah, you've got a 91 mile, that's a 40 fastball, it's below average. And like that's bad, but that's just kind of where we're starting and kind of giving them a reference or whatever. And then I like to think then I'll build from there. And you can kind of tell, then they'll come back to you with a question or something like that. Be like, oh, I saw this on, I accidentally clicked a link and got on Baseball Savant, or something, and tell me what all these circles mean or whatever. So
Hi, my question was, so these players have a life outside of baseball. To what extent, hopefully, you're assuming.
They do?
Right. So to what extent do you monitor what's going on in a player's personal life? And, how do you use that info to help best meet them where they are? And are you trying to balance like player privacy, but also like, I know that he hasn't been mentally okay these past few days, and do I need to know this for the sake of the organization, or do I let him be a person outside of baseball?
So in the last few years, I think baseball has done a much better job with mental health of our players and providing resources for our players to have access to therapists and people to talk to and just help them deal with just growing up, basically, right? Becoming a man. I think a lot of it, social media makes what they do a lot harder. Doing it in person, it's bad enough to struggle, but then to go back to your phone and have everyone tell you how bad you are probably doesn't help. And I think the way most teams are set up, like that's a private conversation, right? Like we don't get a weekly report about like who's seeing the therapist or, you know what I mean? Or who's asking for help or who's, got problems. Our coaches and our like minor league staff, people who are spending time with the players should know what's going on in their lives, right? There's a fine line between prying and into their personal life and trying to help them deal with whatever they're dealing with, right? But I think that's something that's changed quite a bit, probably since you retired. I mean, like there was a time where admitting any weakness was a kiss of death, and that's just not the way it is anymore. And having veteran players in your organization who demonstrate that by admitting that they need help or by being the ones who are seen talking to the sports psychiatrist, like in the clubhouse, makes it a lot easier for the younger guys to do the same thing.
I think a part of this that like we haven't quite discussed yet, and also threads into a little bit of, the makeup of a big leaguer. We play a lot of games. We play the most games, right? Like we play double the most games of the next, sport. When people that just live down the street from me are like, oh, how many games did, like the minor leaguers get 2 days off a month, or now they get Mondays off and stuff like that. But like, so the nature of what's public and private, really it's tough in our game as well, because you're going to the field all the time. You are there all the time. And when you're not there, you're traveling with the same people all the time. So it can be a very tough thing, but it's not just like a regular 9-to-5 job too. So I think, but as resources have poured in and stuff like that with our mental skills departments and most teams and everything like that, it's really more of a family type atmosphere and stuff where really, I think we're improving in that regard.
You look to follow up on that. That's a good question. Even beyond that, like a player's habits, right, make up as part of his process. And are you, is what you're doing in your day-to-day life conducive to success? Like, what are the limits or boundaries, or do some younger players like seek boundaries? Where are we on any of that?
As somebody who had a really hard time leaving it at the field, like the only time I could relax was like when the game was over, right? Like just mentally. And then the next morning, all I was doing was waiting for that game to begin. Like my wife, like, don't you want to go walk around? And nope. Don't you want to go see? Nope. Like so-and-so, yeah, that's great. Like maybe we'll see him after the game at 11 o'clock when I'm the last person out of the clubhouse, right? Type of thing. And so it's really hard. It's a very difficult thing to do, but I think there's more and more people now that can help these players. But at the same point, the social media stuff was nothing I'd ever had to deal with, where it can be very good because it can really accentuate players but it can also be really tough.
Just on that topic, like I think the sports world as a whole is just more aware of the things that affect your performance that are outside of the game itself. So like sleep and eating habits and recovery modalities and all those things, whether it's NBA players or Major League Baseball players or any other sport. I think it's just more of a thing that people talk about and that people invest in. They're human beings. Like we can't we can't slap a sleep tracker on them if they don't want to improve their sleep, right? Like we don't own them, like they are human beings. And so some guys want it, some guys don't. Some guys, are interested in a nutrition consultation for the off season because they have things they want to accomplish. Other guys just want to go home and have mom cook dinner, right? So we try to provide resources to the guys who want it, but we don't force it down anyone's throat.
I have 6 questions for the panel.
Security, throw the doctor out.
One question. How, if at all, when you analyze a pitcher's potential, minor leaguer or amateur, do you consider at all their injury risk or the health, or is it just about performance?
I think we definitely consider their injury history. Like that's a huge part of what you're trying to figure out. Our ability to predict how that's going to translate into future risk is poor to quite poor. But yeah, I mean, your point earlier, you're of no use to us if you're injured, but you're also of no use to us if you can't get anyone out, right? So there's a trade-off somewhere.
Yeah, like we've got plenty of people, models, things that are, especially pitchers, like are really diving into, and I think that factors into in terms of acquisition, right? Like, is this guy a rental that we're buying for 2 months that needs to be helping with us for 2 months? Or is this a pitcher that we're extending for X number of years? Is this a high school pitcher that we're drafting in the first round? Or is this a high school pitcher that we're drafting in the 4th round type of thing? And so those types of things definitely factor in, with the nature of pitcher health and what it is.
For each member of the panel, I imagine that your organizations have deep backlogs in your sort of analytics profiles or portfolios, excuse me. So could you pick one analytics project that the private sector could has the data to analyze and could write an opinion or address that would catch your attention?
My suggestion would be you should do, if you want to catch people's attention, you should do analysis of data that you have, that you like, that you find interesting. Like, honestly, the chances that you like blindly send me a analysis that like changes the way we make decisions, like the moment I read it, is roughly 0%. So don't worry about that. Don't even worry about being right. Worry about showing that you have a passion for baseball, that you have a passion for data, that you have some skills that you can show off, that you have the ability to communicate well. That's way more important than like trying to guess what number 7 on our to-do list is and like choosing the right project.
I'm going to take like a little, so I really love behavioral economics, like Freakonomics and things like that. And like, so that is a big lens of what I look through, and that's not necessarily sports. So those types of things. And like, that's kind of what when I'm analyzing some of our players, because again, like I said, a lot of it's what motivates you and why does, when a catalyst happens, you do A instead of you do B type of thing. So, that could be in purchasing, like when we put the shirts out front, they sell way better than the paint, something like that or whatever. Like it could be no different than, if we switched our batting practice times up, if we got rid of shagging, this is, a pitcher thing. If we got rid of shagging, are the pitchers better? I bet they will be. But anyways, things like that. Like, could we mix up batting practice times? Could we mix up things like that? So anything that's involving a change in any regard that's in giving you a different type of result, I mean, is pretty applicable, I think.
Yeah, I think Michael hit the nail on the head. It's more about showing the skills and the ability to do something with the data you have than it is kind of finding the new North Star. Like, I'll look at some projects that some of our analysts did before they came on, and we'll kind of laugh at the kind of bold conclusions or statements they made in there that they would now take back and not want to have out there because they were trying to revolutionize something when, in fact, there was nothing to revolutionize there, or they didn't have the information that they really needed because the data was private and owned by private corporations, not out there in the public.
I'm told 2 more questions. Where's the ball?
Thanks, guys. Great panel.
Nope.
My question is, do you see a future in the next, 10 to 20 years or so where we kind of get a shift away from analytics because, the playing field sort of levels out a little bit with all teams having same kind of technology. And then there's sort of this resort back a little bit to that traditional scouting to try to get a competitive advantage? Or do you think it'll always kind of just be for the foreseeable future, like more and more towards analytics?
I'd say I think we're already there. I think their teams' numbers of scouts were going down for a little while and it's kind of flattened out where being able to, teams need scouts. There's a way we can use that with the analytics, but it's not going to go away. And I think it's kind of the teams that are able to use that information in the best way are the ones that are going to have the advantage. Where, like you're saying, we all have the same information and it's who can use it better and then combine it with the more subjective analysis to make the best decisions.
I think too, kind of like we had alluded to earlier, the nature of finding the 5'10", 175-pound guy that's, I think it might not necessarily be, it's more, but it might not be different, if that makes any sense. Like, I mean, I think you have to define what is analytics. I mean, anything, any number, anything you're making a decision on could be technically analytics. But like we have, from when I started, the number of radars we had at college stadiums was not that many. Now, you can get in front of a radar basically if you pitch at any Division I college or if you pitch in any summer league type of stuff. So I think that is probably going to increase, and to kind of piggyback on our earlier topic of the FOMO that players would have, like our job is to find major leaguers, right? Like there's not that many in the world, and if you're a major leaguer and all 30 teams miss on you, like I think that's pretty rare, if that makes any sense. So the FOMO that with the crazy the summer ball and the travel ball and all this stuff, like if you're good enough, you'll probably pitch in front of a radar or you'll run in front of a radar or something, we'll find you, So I think it'll seep further, and because we'll cast wider nets.
A couple of thoughts. One is I think more data is always better. I don't think the industry's ever going to turn down more data. I think the ways that we compete, we have the exact same data flow from MLB for every minor league game covering, basically almost like StatCast for the minor leagues. Like the way we compete is on how we process it, which honestly, our systems are probably pretty similar. How we use it, which is a huge differentiator on how an organization communicates amongst the group, how they communicate it to the coaches and to the players, how they get buy-in. That's a big differentiator. And then the other types of data we have, and one of the types of data we have that they don't have is what our scouts wrote. And they have scouts who wrote reports that we don't have, right? So I think more data is better. And in some ways, scouts have come back to being important because they're one of the few sources of data that we can have an advantage in the quality of data we have. And so I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a more of everything.
Yeah, I think analytics now is just part of the foundation, and then you build from there. But I would say this to you, there's always room to zag, right? If everybody's zigging, zag. Just as if I think a team has become a bunch of analytic robots, I'm going to get baseball-y. If everybody's getting very baseball-y, I'm going to get more analytic. Whatever, you're constantly looking for best practices, competitive advantage. That's why this stuff is so fascinating, is you're always looking to do things better. And look, we're talking to guys who work for model organizations. There's a lot going on that's right, and for the past 2 decades with the Cardinals, for the past 8 years with the Diamondbacks, where, and it's a holistic, it's a holistic attack from the teams. So it starts at the top, it starts at ownership, and then it's your club president, your general manager, and then it's how everybody is working together. And that's like a team chemistry thing as well. All right, one more question. Pass the ball, and that's it. They're telling me to wrap, and you can go have dinner.
All right, thanks, guys. So I happen to know somebody that made it a few interviews deep with an organization and didn't get their role. So how do you guys kind of value people that, when you're bringing on new analysts to your teams, somebody that more so pursues higher academia, or somebody that more so pursues the workforce and proves themselves well in that sort of area?
What do you mean by higher academia? Do you mean like a master's degree?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. It depends on the role we're hiring for in a lot of ways. But I do not remember any post we've ever had, any decision we've ever made where having an advanced degree was a requirement, or, I mean, the skills that we need are the requirement, not the degree. There are cases where, you know, for certain types of modeling jobs, it's very likely you'll need an advanced degree, but it's not, I don't think we've ever required one, because if you have the skills from a previous job, from other work, from wherever you found the skills to do the job, that's what we're looking for, not, you know, not what you're going to hang behind the wall or behind you in your office when you get hired.
I agree with that 100%. Like if your friend's already making it multiple layers through the interview process, they've probably already passed any sort of technical assessment or shown they have the required skills. And then it's more fitting the organizational culture, interviewing with the people they're going to be working with, and how well they're going to fit with that team. Even for tech jobs and degrees, like my friend who is a coder and makes the most money out of all my friends did not go to college. He taught himself all the required skills for his job, worked hard, and got his foot in the door, and then got promoted.
Let's
Just one
hear it
thing,
from
like-
Max Glick,
Oh,
Burke
just-
Badenhop,
oh, real quick.
and
like,
Michael Girsch has one more point. Yes.
it's really hard to get a job. Like, don't take it personally if you don't get chosen, if you make it way into the system, or if you don't make it through the first hurdle. Like, I sent out 50 resumes when I was trying to do this, and I got 3 people who responded at all, and I got 1 real interview out of it, right? And that was, I'm sitting here now, I've been in the game for 20 years, right? You don't need to hit a high percentage of your shots. You just need to get the one opportunity. It's really hard. If you want to do it, keep working at it, but don't take it personally if you know, your buddy who didn't make it, like it's probably nothing that happened, except like there's only one job and you get 1,000 resumes, you got to choose one of them.
Guys, thank you so much. That was excellent. Thank you. Max, Burke, Michael, thank you. You guys are great as well. Thank you so much. We'll see you tomorrow.